Hello and welcome back to Contagious Conversations. Today in episode 345, we will be discussing the unique features of the Human Immunodeficiency Virus, or HIV, and the significance that comes with it. There is usually a large amount of stigma and misinformation surrounding infectious diseases. Even when it comes to some of the more known infectious diseases such as HIV, there has been and continues to be a history of misconceptions and misunderstandings of the disease which can put a negative connotation on those affected by the disease. Within this podcast, we will discuss general information about HIV with important highlights emphasizing the characteristics, transmission, symptoms, treatment, prevention, and ongoing research in preventative methods of HIV. HIV belongs to the genus Lentivirus within the family of Retroviridae and subfamily Orthororetrovirinae. Additionally, HIV is classified into two types, type 1 and type 2, called HIV-1 and HIV-2. These are based on the genetic traits and variants in the viral antigens.
Now let's talk about the characteristics of HIV. On a basic level, HIV is a virus that targets and attacks the body's immune system. More specifically, we can describe several important characteristics of HIV through the HIV life cycle. The HIV life cycle is the process that the virus goes through to destroy and infect CD4 cells, which are important types of white blood cells that have a crucial role in the human immune system. After infection of these CD4 cells, HIV can then use the machinery of CD4 cells to multiply and spread in the body. Now let's take an overview look at the life cycle. The life cycle of HIV consists of 7 steps: binding, fusion, reverse transcription, integration, replication, assembly, and budding. Within the first step, binding, HIV binds to receptors on CD4 cells. In the next step of fusion, HIV envelope and CD4 cell membranes fuse to allow HIV to enter the CD4 cell. This leads to step 3, called reverse transcription, where once inside the CD4 cell, HIV releases and uses reverse transcriptase to convert its genetic material, HIV RNA, into HIV DNA. This conversion allows HIV to enter the CD4 cell nucleus and combine with the cell's genetic material. And this leads us to step 4, called integration, where HIV uses an enzyme called integrase to insert its viral DNA into the DNA of the CD4 cell. In step 5 of replication, once integrated into the CD4 cell DNA, HIV then begins to use the machinery of the CD4 cells to make long chains of HIV proteins, which are the building blocks of HIV. In step 6 of assembly, new HIV proteins and HIV RNA then move to the surface of the cell and assemble into immature HIV. In the last step of the life cycle, called budding, the newly formed immature HIV pushes itself out of the host CD4 cell and releases another enzyme called protease, which breaks up the long protein chains in the immature virus, creating mature viruses. Be sure to check out our website page dedicated to the HIV life cycle to learn more about the intricate relationships involved in the HIV life cycle and also some of the drug classes that are used to prevent this life cycle from occurring. Now let's discuss some of the risk factors of HIV. Within the US, HIV is primarily spread through unprotected sexual intercourse and sharing of needles and syringes. Additionally, HIV affects all people in the US. However, some groups based on age, race, and/or gender are disproportionately affected. For example, in 2018, one study found that African Americans accounted for approximately 42% of new infections in the US, but only 13% of the US population. Overall, certain populations, including racial and ethnic minorities, low-income people, and sexual and gender minorities, generally experience poorer social conditions which lead to poorer health outcomes. It is important that efforts are made to reduce these disparities associated with HIV in order to enhance future research efforts to end HIV on a global scale. And some of the more specific risk factors include viral load. Viral load is the amount of HIV in the blood of someone who has HIV. People with undetectable viral loads generally live healthy lives, whereas people with high or detectable loads are at increased risk of transmitting HIV. Another risk factor is having another sexually transmitted disease, or STD, which puts you at an immunocompromised state, increasing the chances of transmitting HIV. Alcohol and drug use also increase the likeliness to engage in riskier sexual activities, such as unprotected sex. Sharing contaminated needles and receiving unsafe injections, blood transfusions, and tissue transplantations are also some of the more specific risk factors. And looking at some of the more interesting facts pertaining to the disease burden of HIV, in 2022, approximately 39 million people globally lived with HIV, and approximately 630,000 people globally have died to HIV-related illnesses within 2022. Another interesting fact, and earliest reference of HIV, was when fragments of HIV-1 from a 1959 blood sample represented the earliest known case of HIV infection. Now moving on to the transmission of HIV. The virus is generally spread from bodily fluids of an infected person. These bodily fluids can include contaminated blood, breast milk, semen, and vaginal fluids. As previously discussed, one of the most common transmission methods is through sexual intercourse, whether heterosexual or homosexual. More specifically, transmission results when the virus is exposed to mucosal surfaces or passed through the skin, which is a process called percutaneous inoculation. Additionally, HIV can also be transmitted through maternal infant exposure. Another topic that I think connects with the concept of transmission is the historical and still current stigma that surrounds HIV. This stigma consists of the negative attitudes and beliefs about people with HIV. Along with this, there also continues to be prejudice or stereotyping of people with HIV as socially unacceptable. Some examples of HIV stigma include believing that only one specific group of people can get HIV, or feeling that people who get HIV deserve it based on their life choices. There is also a large amount of discrimination against people with HIV. Whereas stigma refers to the negative attitudes and beliefs, discrimination refers to the behaviors that result from those attitudes and beliefs. For example, socially isolating people with HIV can be considered discrimination. We can all help to end the stigma of HIV through our actions and leading with supportive behaviors. HIV stigma is significantly linked to fear of HIV when it first emerged, and there are numerous amounts of misconceptions on the disease currently. By taking action to educate others on HIV and supporting behaviors, we can help end the HIV stigma together. There are also some additional interesting but rare transmission methods, which can include food contamination, tattoos and body piercings, and biting and spitting.
Now let's discuss some of the more significant symptoms and clinical signs of HIV. Generally, within 2 to 4 weeks after HIV infection, people tend to experience flu-like symptoms such as mouth ulcers, fatigue, and fevers. However, some people may be asymptomatic or experience no symptoms at all during this time. Additionally, we can break down some of the more specific symptoms into the 3 stages of HIV. The first stage of HIV, also known as acute HIV infection, progresses over a few weeks and is where people generally experience flu-like symptoms. This stage is also responsible for large amounts of the virus being found in the blood and makes an individual highly contagious. Stage 2, also called chronic HIV infection, asymptomatic HIV infection, or clinical latency, is a stage where HIV is active and reproducing, but people may not experience any symptoms. However, it is important to note that during this stage, people are still able to transmit HIV. Without HIV treatment, this stage may last a decade or longer before people progress into stage 3 of HIV, also called acquired immunodeficiency syndrome or AIDS. This is the most severe stage of HIV infection, characterized by extremely high viral loads in an individual and increased ease of viral transmission. Symptoms during this stage generally increase in severity due to a significantly weakened immune system. With AIDS, individuals may also become susceptible to a wide variety of opportunistic infections or other serious illnesses. This stage typically lasts for 3 years, ultimately resulting in death. One of the most important factors in preventing the impact of HIV is getting tested. This is important since the flu-like symptoms that we discussed in stage 1 of HIV infection are very broad. Therefore, it's generally recommended that if you experience these flu-like symptoms and believe that you may have been exposed to HIV, get tested as soon as possible. Early and effective treatment has been shown to prevent HIV infection from progressing to AIDS.
In today's world, there are numerous methods available to enhance the efficacy and the prevention of HIV. We can categorize some of these methods into biological and behavioral prevention methods. Some of the most beneficial biological methods include pre-exposure prophylaxis or PrEP, which is a medicine that is taken to reduce the chances of getting an HIV infection. PrEP is generally taken by people who do not have HIV but are at a higher risk of being transmitted with HIV. To put it simply, PrEP works by blocking the HIV reverse transcriptase enzyme, which is a crucial enzyme of HIV that allows it to replicate in CD4 cells. Another similar method is post-exposure prophylaxis or PEP. The difference with PEP is that it is taken after exposure to HIV. PEP works by attacking HIV at the site of exposure and preventing it from further replicating in infected cells. One behavioral prevention method, and perhaps one of the most effective, is abstinence, meaning avoiding all types of sexual intercourse. Some other behavioral prevention methods include never sharing needles and syringes. This is because of the way HIV is spread through the body and bodily fluids. If someone who is HIV positive uses a needle, they will likely leave some of their own bodily fluids in the needle, which can then be transmitted to the next person who uses that needle. This is why if someone is using needles for any reason, it is best to use single-use fresh needle every time. Another very easy way to prevent HIV is to be abstinent. Abstinence is the practice of not engaging in sexual intercourse. This is a 100% effective way to prevent the spread of HIV. If one chooses to engage in sexual behavior, using protection is another great, although not 100% effective method of HIV prevention. This, as well as reducing your number of partners or having effective communication with them to discuss potential STDs they may have, can also decrease your chances of getting HIV.
HIV continues to be a major focal point, both nationally and globally. Influential organizations such as the World Health Organization, or WHO, and the Centers for Disease Control, also known as the CDC, continue to maintain and increase efforts in responding to the disease. Additionally, HIV heavily impacts the lives of people other than the symptoms discussed previously. For example, HIV is significantly associated with socioeconomic aspects resulting in a detrimental burden on those affected with the disease. Furthermore, research for more effective and enhanced methods, including treatment, prevention, and control, continues to be researched.
Of the human body, resulting in a weakened immune state.
On a large scale, socioeconomic status, or SES, has a significant impact on human functioning both nationally and globally. SES has been shown to largely impact those of lower SES and impoverished communities. Research shows that SES can be associated with HIV relating to the likeliness of contracting HIV. Specifically, women with a low SES many times cannot access prenatal care to do testing for bloodborne diseases such as HIV. Those experiencing food insecurity, i.e. a low SES, are more likely to be experiencing low CD4 counts, which further suppresses the immune system.
Currently, there are many ongoing projects, such as the Enhanced Comprehensive HIV Prevention Planning Project, working to reduce new HIV infections while also linking those who are already infected to care and treatment to provide health outcomes. CDC. These projects aim to reduce HIV-related health disparities and achieve more coordinated national response due to the fact HIV is an epidemic within the United States. The Medical Monitoring Project is a surveillance-based system that aims to provide information about those with HIV, including their behaviors, quality of care, as well as barriers faced to getting care. Data that is collected from this project can help guide policies and decisions aimed at improving care and decreasing disparities for those with HIV in the United States.
In concluding this episode of Contagious Conversations, episode 345, we have discussed the general characteristics of HIV, hopefully giving you all a foundational understanding of the disease. Wrapping this up, we have discussed how HIV is a disease that targets the CD4 cells of the human body, resulting in a weakened immune state. We also discussed its symptoms, treatments, risk factors, and prevention methods. Additionally, we hopefully gave insight into the historical and currently present stigma that surrounds HIV and have provided you all with the knowledge to help end the stigma. Furthermore, we have discussed some of the more established HIV prevention movements, such as those led by the CDC and the World Health Organization, and have provided you with resources on our webpage to further your knowledge of HIV. After listening to our podcast and peeking around our connected website, we hope that we have provided you with the knowledge, education, and resources to have a better understanding of HIV, and hope that you all can assist us and those affected by HIV to make efforts in ending HIV on a global scale. Thank you as always for tuning in to today's podcast episode, and we hope to see you all back in the future.